You believe this about Princess Di? She's having, they're not getting along, and the royal family, Charles, and you don't believe this? No. How? It's in People magazine. It's got to be true. Look at this. It's in Us too. No. Do you believe these stories about Mario Cuomo? No. What do you believe? You're not sure, are you? It's like flypaper. Once somebody says something about, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's terrible.
That's why they started.
That's what?
That's why they start these rumors. They know that once the rumor starts, it's going to gather momentum.
And sell magazines.
So they can, yeah, or they, and yeah.
Or get audiences to
I'm
talk.
sorry, you'll get
Or
what?
to get audiences to talk about things like this. It would get on TV and on the radio and in more newspapers.
Sort of like you're doing right now.
That's right. But I don't...
Do you, yeah, but do you believe, excuse me, I don't usually get this.
That's okay.
Your husband may not understand this. I don't even know if you're married. But just seriously, is there any truth at all to this potential split between Di and Charles?
I don't think so. I think she's just doing her thing. She's just getting to know herself and wants to do what she wants to do, and he wants to do what he wants to do.
But there's no divorce pending.
I don't think so.
Let's start a rumor, Phil.
No, I don't want to. Let me tell you what's not so funny. Meet Marcia Lutz. This is something. Here is as outstanding a woman has ever enlisted or been a part of the United States Air Force. An exceptional athlete who's won all kinds of awards for diving. What else?
Oh, racquetball.
Racquetball. She's a real superstar athlete, and also, as all the reports indicated, you were in the service in '72, I think.
That's correct.
Always great references. Everybody she reported to thought she was wonderful. Somebody said she was having an affair with her secretary. Well, look at this. She must be lesbian. She's a homosexual. Honest to God, they said that about her. What?
That's terrible.
Yeah, easy for you to say. How about living through this?
Yeah.
She had to quit the Air Force.
Completely destroyed her career.
That's not right.
What?
That's not right.
So what, incidentally, as you know, apparently you can't be a gay person and be in the Air Force, is that right?
That's true.
Or in any branch of the service. Robert Bryant is her attorney at law. What's the moral of this story, Marcia? You looked okay to me. I assume that, but it was rough, huh?
Terrible. It's like living through hell. It really was. And it still is, because we still have not resolved the case.
And the point is, what was said about her wasn't even true. And yet, just the accusations destroyed her career.
Mm-hmm.
And it was predicted that she would eventually be the first woman on the Joint Chiefs of Staffs, that she would be a general, that she was the rising star in the U.S. Air Force. She was the top of all women in the Air Force, and her career was destroyed.
And your secretary, and you and your secretary often worked overtime, didn't you?
Oh, hand in hand. You have
And
to.
it was this overtime dedication, do good, my job, my country forever, that enhanced the heat of the rumors.
That's exactly correct. There was nothing I could do about it either. Absolutely nothing.
And one other thing. You're a good athlete, so you must be a lesbian.
All good athletes are lesbians. Yes. That's a ridiculous statement. And for me, Hugh,
It is a ridiculous
Phil,
statement.
It ruined my career. I had to
What?
end up resigning.
Yeah. What?
Do you feel that the rumor was started by someone who didn't want you to progress further?
Yes, definitely. There were several disgruntled people in my squadron, so why not? Let's start something. And to answer your question, yes, there was an investigation. However, 2 months, I was fired on January 26, 1985. 2 months later, the investigation was over. There were never any charges filed.
You reinstated, were you not?
I was fired from my position, but I resigned from the Air Force because of those rumors, even though I was never charged with anything.
What?
Nothing was true.
Why did you resign? If you knew it wasn't true, why did you
I had to. I was fired from my position. My career was terminated. I was told I would
wasn't your career worth fighting for? I mean, if you knew it wasn't true, why didn't you fight?
My career was dependent upon my superiors. They told me I would never be promoted again.
And this was
Why were you fired? I'm not clear why you were fired. Did they say you were fired because we think you're a lesbian?
No, they were smart enough not to say that.
No, they wouldn't come out and directly say that. That's correct.
I've got all those court papers. I'm sorry. Did you lose all your benefits, he wants to know. There's a practical
Yes,
man, I'll
what I
tell you
have
this. We get right to the good stuff up here in Connecticut.
correct.
Yeah, you would have, since 1972, you've accumulated a good deal of benefits.
By resigning prior to the end of my 20 years, yes, I had no benefits. So I had put 14 years of dedicated service into the Air Force and was forced to resign.
Yeah. Is this, I assume that the rumor mill was peopled mostly by males.
Generally speaking, oh yes, definitely. The males started it, the males perpetuated it.
Who advised you to resign, she wants
My
to know.
superior officers and friends, people I worked for. I had some friends that were very high up in the military also. Everyone.
Why, this audience appears to be disappointed that you resign. You want her to stay and fight this thing, right? Well, easy for you to say. I mean, you go to work, nobody talks to you. You know what I mean? They walk around you.
You can't fight when you're not charged with something. Okay? I was,
What rank were you?
no, No, I'm not
Were you married? Are you married? He wants to know.
I was a major. I had been promoted below the zone to major and was getting ready for below the zone to lieutenant colonel.
And if you had stayed in, you would have never been allowed to
That's
make
correct.
grade again.
My immediate boss said, well, Marcia, you can stay in if you want, but you're going to see your subordinates, you're going to see your people go ahead of you. You'll never be promoted again. You're destroyed. That's exactly correct.
At the time of being fired as commander of the 2035 Communications Squadron by Defendant Colonel Robert Dempsey, the plaintiff, that's you, she is suing. So don't get crazy now. She's trying, you know, maybe we get a big award here. Who knows? Maybe you'll be on the jury. Not likely. She's suing Uncle Sam.
But there's a problem there.
What is it?
The problem is that Uncle Sam, the military, seems to be immune from prosecution. They have an umbrella of immunity.
What do you say about that, attorney at law? So who are you suing?
Well, we're suing the government, but what the court has held so far is that the government is immune. That the U.S. Air Force, there's something they call military immunity, and they're totally protected.
The plaintiff was accused of having a homosexual relationship with her civilian secretary and falsifying time cards. She was not given a hearing, but was terminated strictly upon unsupported accusations. Approximately 1 week later, she and her squadron had received excellent ratings. That is to say, 1 week earlier. She was prohibited in attending a meeting of base officials, which resulted in the decision. The plaintiff was told by Colonel Dempsey at the time of the firing a Saturday to clean out her office that weekend and not return to work. In essence, without a hearing or factual inquiry, the plaintiff was viewed as guilty and removed from her command.
So you were fired for falsifying time cards.
Well, that meant that I gave my secretary a day off during Christmas vacation for all of the overtime that she had
You
spent.
can't sue Uncle Sam as a military person, but
That's
now that
right.
you're a civilian, you can't sue him.
Appears not, because I was in the military at the time.
She can only really sue to get her job back, and if she got her job back and went back in the Air Force, she was told she would never be promoted above major, even though before that, everybody predicted she'd be a general.
Okay, now, let me, we're not finished yet. While you consider this, these are incidents good. Who's immune from this kind of thing? Next thing you know, huh?
What happened to the secretary?
Now, wait a minute. Hang on a minute. What did happen to the secretary?
Well, the secretary went back to work on Monday, and then because of such the environment of hatred, because the people had initiated this were right there in the administrative section, her husband and she got together and she couldn't take it anymore, so she ended up resigning, if you will, from the service.
And you have to wonder to yourself, as I'm sure you have, if you were a male, first of all, you'd be a good old boy making eyes at your secretary.
Exactly.
Wait a minute. Hang on. What?
You're saying if it's a male with a female, how would it be if it was a male with a male secretary?
Same thing, probably. Well, the services do not look kindly upon homosexual activity. One more time for the Midwest, this woman is saying this was not in any way an intimate sexual relationship. This was a woman in whom she had extreme confidence and a very good, mutually satisfying team relationship in the professional sense. And somebody says, you know, a couple of guys at the Xerox machine, start it, and there you go.
This would not have happened had Marcia been a he, been a Marshal instead of a Marcia. And it would not have happened had she not been so outstanding and there had been resentment against her for being a woman who was more outstanding than her male peers.
Now, wait a minute. Hang on a minute. We're not finished here. Robert Hughes, M.D. Listen to this. What's not to love here, Dr. Hughes? Pediatrician, suburban Dallas, a great practice. He's making $150,000 a year. And the babies love him, and so do the mothers and the fathers. He is, obviously, without question, a professionally accomplished physician. Was it paper, the newspaper?
Yes, on September 11th, the newspaper in Mesquite broke the story that I was HIV positive for the antibody. I had known this for about 2 years. I had really been facing up to it in this past year. There had been various things that made me have to face up to it. And one thing was that my roommate was a very hard person to live with. Consequently, I had to go to a lawyer. I got a restraining order that barred him from going and telling anybody that I was HIV positive or that I had AIDS, which he was calling my office, had been telling people in my office that I had AIDS. The newspaper got hold of this here restraining order, which had this spelled out, the reasons why. And so the story broke on Friday in the newspaper that I had HIV positive antibodies.
Right. When you say roommate, is this a person who was a former lover?
Yes, a former lover.
So you lived in a monogamous homosexual relationship with a male?
For 3 years, yes.
Now you're a practicing pediatrician and you test HIV positive, which does not mean you have AIDS. It means that you may be a candidate for the insidious diseases that the immune deficiency allows in when you have this. You have no symptoms now, do you?
No, I have no symptoms. But on the other hand, you have to realize if you're HIV positive, whether you got ARC, whether you got AIDS, you're just as contagious.
ARC, AIDS-related
complex. So
complex.
There's all that fear from the
understand.
general population.
I promise you we get that. Your roommate became difficult, are you saying?
He was becoming very difficult. I can't really talk too much about that.
All right, well, you don't have to, but this obliged you to do something legally? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I felt I had to get a restraining order.
To ensure that he, didn't invade your premises?
No, well, he was no longer in the premises. I had gotten him out at that time.
You were worried about what he might be saying to people, is that it?
Yes, he made threats to call the American Academy of Pediatrics, the local county medical society.
So when you made the application for the restraining order, that becomes a matter of public record.
Yes, it did. I did not know it at the time, but I found out it did.
Now, here's the question. Incidentally, he is wiped out. His practice is over. How do you feel about the paper for reporting it? How do you feel about mothers or parents who would decline to bring their child to him? Why wouldn't his right to privacy be protected? Is your right to know supersede his right of privacy? He gave up the right to privacy what? When he went to court. You probably agree, don't you, doctor?
No, I don't. I think when you go and get a restraining order, you should have still the right to privacy. I think our court system is wrong now.
Not if it's on the court record.
It should be a separate...
Well, you'll have to change the law of the land to change that. Maybe you better publicize this to everybody, that once you go to court, it's a public record.
Yes, I was not aware of it, and I think my lawyer should have told me, but I think efforts should have been made to restrain that.
After the fact, it was a public record. The newspaper had every right to print it. I think they should print it. I think that the parents of the children you were treating had every right not to come to you.
All right, let me ask you this. Suppose...
You are contagious.
All right, let me ask you a question now.
In what sense am I contagious, then? Could you tell me what sense I'm contagious?
We just had a little conversation here that because of the fact that you have test positive to this, there is a strong possibility that you will become contagious.
How am I contagious, though?
Because you might prick your finger and get the blood on the children.
That is not going to spread the virus. There's been no instance
Well, I am glad to spread that piece of information then, but if in my situation, I wouldn't bring my children to you.
There are parents that have that concern that by sticking my finger and bleeding on their child on their hand, that they're going to get AIDS. You have to go and have a pretty big cut, and they have to have a big open wound in order to even have that chance there.
Let me ask this question of this woman. Hang on one second. If a doctor tests, as Dr. Hughes has, HIV positive, does the AMA have an obligation to you?
I believe they do.
so that physicians who have AIDS should go public. We should know about it.
Surgeons who are alcoholics should be reported too.
And who would make that decision?
I think that the AMA should have guts enough to make it, but if they don't, we need to get someone else to do it.
Right. And I assume you feel that the airline should also blow the whistle on pilots who are alcoholics.
Definitely.
And who decides who's an alcoholic and who isn't, and how should this information, should they like hold a press conference or call the New York Times or what? And incidentally, what do you want to know about talk show hosts? And who should decide? And what about you, may I say? May we publish your blood test?
You may, anytime you want.
I see. What about, hang on just a second, hold a second. What about what? What?
What about stewardesses? I mean, they're going to serve you food. I would take my child to a doctor who tested positive because I hope to God my child does not exchange body fluids with her doctor.
So you don't, uh-huh.
What about patients that go to see doctors and don't let the doctor know that they are tested AIDS positive?
So everybody who has AIDS, it should be made public. No. We should have a list at Public Square downtown about all the townsfolk who have.
No,
well, this woman thinks so.
This is not a disease that's contagious by talking.
What did I misinterpret here? What did I? What?
For gossip.
All right, go ahead.
Now you're putting me up for gossip. I will straighten you out. I will tell you that, in my opinion, I would not go to take my child.
I know that, but that's not the question. The question is, what do you think society owes you in terms of information about this or any other person? You've already established that you want pilots who drink and surgeons who drink to be made known to the public so we can make a decision about whether they want to operate on us?
No, known to the public so I can decide whether or not I choose to have that surgeon operate on me.
Huh?
How do you want that to be public?
Listen to the question for a second. Yes.
How do you expect that to be public if you're not demanding that there be this public
You've never
list?
lived in a small town. I mean, there were
That's
surgeons
just letting
in a
a...
small town
Right.
that
Well, then that's...
I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole.
In other words, the rumor mill talks about those surgeons. Let's talk about that. The yacht club?
There is one thing that is being done about doctors that are alcoholics. If they can't practice, if they're on drugs, they lose their license. This happens all the time in Texas, and I'm sure throughout the country.
Yeah.
It isn't even comparable.
This woman talked about small town. Now, we did a little rumor test. You ever play the game, you know, where you pass to the next party, the next party, the next party? Show them what we asked them to, Brian, can we see that on the, here's what we asked them to share with each other. 2 boys and 2 girls were in a rowboat when it overturned. Only the girls knew how to swim. The girls grabbed the boys and guided them to shore. The boys were very grateful that the girls had saved their lives. 2 boys and 2 girls were in a rowboat when it overturned. Only the girls knew how to swim. The girls grabbed the boys and saved the boys. And what do you suppose the 10th person told us? Now, that's what we asked. One person to tell another person, what do you suppose the final... Now, this is an important question. Remember the small town, the rumors...
The guy saved the girls, right?
What?
The guy saved the girls, right?
What?
They all died?
What?
Girls got pregnant.
Huh?
The boys were drinking and the girls saved the girls.
Show them the tape, Brian. Here's this. You remember the story now. There she is. She's telling. Now watch. She's there now. She's whispering to this person. Look at this. Now watch this. This woman's going to share them. Look at this. This is from our studio audience here in Stamford. Look at this. She's. All right. Now, what's the report? What?
2 boys and a girl were in a boat. The boat fell over. The boys rescued the girl, and she was very grateful.
Phil, does that surprise you? No. Here, all right, hang on one second.
All right.
We make the rumor fit our prejudice.
Yeah.
So in a white community, a rumor that might involve some kind of interracial incident, the white community is more likely to lay the blame on the person of color in the conflict. Or is, in this case, sexism work. So you might want to keep that in mind the next time you hear a rumor in your small town and at the yacht club or wherever. Hey, Jack Levin, PhD, professor of sociology, Northeastern University, Boston. You're an expert on rumor and gossip. In fact, you've written a book about it.
It's a great book.
I'm sure it is. I couldn't put it down. Gossip, the inside scoop. Jack Levin and Arnold Arluke are the co-authors of. Why do you care about this? Why is this worthy of serious scholarship?
Because gossip and rumor are indispensable to democracy. We couldn't survive without them. How's that?
Really?
But Phil, I just want to point out that this rumor is one that I gave your producer. I use it in my classes.
Right.
And exactly the same thing happens. We see things the way we expect to see them, as you point out.
But look who else is here. Leah Rosen is a senior writer for People magazine. She's an expert on the British royal family. What is it you wanted to say? You better give us the whole scoop here, Lee.
There is a difference between a rumor that is merely making its way down Main Street and a rumor that a reporter starts checking out and telephoning and asking everybody and looking up the court register.
And there's a difference between that. There's a difference between that activity and the actual publication of it.
Absolutely.
In other words, Mario Cuomo's living with this.
Right.
And finally comes New York Magazine. I'm happy to, I don't own any stock in the magazine, but Cuomo in those rumors.
And you heard those. I remember friends turning to me at parties and going, well, you know, he really can't run because his wife has mafia connections.
Yeah.
And you were hearing it for 2 months till they finally did the story.
And it's like flypaper. You can't get it off. You can't get it off.
That's right. You can't get it off. So what you have to do is you have to silence implies guilt. So you have to catch it fast.
This is really your advice, isn't it?
That is my advice.
The minute somebody hears the
that's right.
Go public right now.
Get on the Phil Donahue program. Get on Phil Donahue and make
say
sure
this is
they know your
baloney.
side.
Say this is baloney. See, some people, that's an interesting piece of advice, and we respect it. Not everybody agrees with it. You know, there are, as you know, people say, well, don't say anything. If you say something, you just legitimize it, it'll make it worse.
And there are a lot of companies who wish they had used that advice, but it was too late.
Who wish they had been more aggressive and bold in saying.
That's right, but they were silent, hoping that the rumor would go away.
Right. What should Marcia have done?
Well, you know, people expect the military to be full of men. And so they're trying to explain this. I think that the advice that I just gave could have been used by Marcia.
She should have held a press conference and said, look, here's my secretary, here's her husband.
Yes.
You're putting us through agony here. I'm tired of full military, just like Ollie North. She, you know, I'm sure she looked great in a uniform. Come out and appeal to the flag and truth and motherhood.
And also get the local version or the military version of Phil Donahue to take her side. Someone with credibility.
But that would not have worked in her case, Jack, because they had already made the decision before she even knew about it that she was
she knew that she knew the buzzing was underway.
No, the buzzing, she really knew about the buzzing when she was hauled into an office and told, you are fired. And that's when she
Did they use the word homosexual with you when they talked to you? Did anybody ever raise it?
Not my commander, no.
Nobody.
But when I was fired, on that Saturday, I was told by my commander, you cannot speak to any of the members of your squadron, you cannot go near that squadron.
And they could not speak to her. She was shunned.
Okay.
I'll give you a chance, all of you. We're talking about rumors, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Total oatmeal?
It's new.
Well, we like old-fashioned Quaker oats, right, George?
Mother, Total Oatmeal has 100% of the daily allowance of vitamin A.
We've been getting that all along.
No, we haven't.
100% of C.
Been getting that all along.
No, we haven't.
100% of 9 vitamins and iron.
No, we haven't.
Total Oatmeal has 10 times the vitamin nutrition of old-fashioned Quaker oats. Good work. Total Oatmeal, the vitamin nutrition you thought you were getting all along.
Louis Rich breast turkey. So lean, so light. Slice it for tonight.
Wow, turkey.
For tomorrow.
Wow, turkey.
Anytime. Carved and cooked whole from the bird. Its natural shape says it's juicy and delicious. Louis Rich makes turkey so easy, so tonight.
Turkey.
So luscious. So light. It took Louis Rich to make turkey so right.
Stouffer's Dinner Supreme presents the Duffy Sisters.
Hi, Joey. What's new?
What's new? This is new, Mrs. Duffy. Stouffer's Dinner Supreme.
We know all about Stouffer's, Joey.
But this is their new chicken parmesan dinner, complete unto itself. And this is Stouffer's Turkey Divan.
That is new.
Veal parmesan, peppy chicken Monterey, all microwavable and all with the name Stouffer's.
We'll take them.
Great.
Stouffer's. Now we make Dinner Supreme, too.
Ask him what's new.
At Bradley's, you know us for a lot. Our jewelry and our watches. You know us for small appliances and our luggage. And now, you'll know us for our incredibly low prices on AT&T phones. Right now at Bradley's, this Trimline 210 is just $39.99. And this AT&T Cordless 4410 is just $87.99. So now you know us for all these. And all these AT&T phones on sale now at Bradley's.
Do this without you. Yes. Yeah.
I'd like to know if the pediatrician was ever going to tell the parents of your patients that you have this. Were you going to let them?
You joined us late. Robert Hughes, MD, is the suburban Dallas physician who had to literally close his practice when the newspaper reported that he had been tested for HIV positive, and all his patients very rapidly faded away. He's now, I assume, an unemployed person?
That's not quite true that all of them faded away. There are many people that don't have these prejudices and this bigotry. There are many that are very loyal. I talked to one just before I left even that wanted to get information from me because they were going to another doctor, weren't satisfied, wanted my information. There are many loyal patients.
Well, but obviously not enough stayed to allow you to continue your practice.
No, that's the problem with this country. They have a great deal of prejudice against homosexuality. Barbara's example is a very poignant example of that.
Yeah.
Sure, she's not a homosexual.
Well, wait a minute.
Still, that shouldn't even have been a reason to do away with her. That shouldn't have been the issue.
Right. But you get the double whammy. You suffer from not only homophobia, but also the uncertainty of this disease.
And that's a big problem. People feel there's not much known about AIDS. There is quite a bit known about the epidemiology, and there's probably not going to be hardly anything else new coming out about it.
What?
Do you feel that you are contagious?
No, I don't feel I'm contagious, except if I have sex with somebody or if I gave my blood to someone.
Or if you cut yourself, you said.
No,
yes.
If he cuts himself, and you cut yourself, and he goes like that, and there's an exchange of blood, then you are
by going a little finger stick and then having my blood drip on you, you're not going to get it unless you have a bad open lesions, dermatitis real bad. And you'd have to have quite a bit of it and quite a bit of my blood.
But can we agree to this? Dr. Koop has got to, as enlightened a member of the Reagan administration as we have, once the general public recognizes that it is a skin depth away from contamination, we cannot be surprised that a significant percentage of those people will become anxious and will alter their behavior in cases like yours. Now what?
People are scared and frightened, but they shouldn't be that frightened, though.
Well, I think you've got two different cases here. Marcia's case is a fear of homosexuality, anti-homosexuality. Your case is parents fear medical for their children. And it's not as if just because you're gay.
That has been more the fear. There hasn't been a great fear about homosexuality.
It's not you're being gay.
There's very little of that.
And these are two distinct cases. And what's interesting with the press involvement in all this, gay is the one thing you don't print in the press. That is still, I mean, you do not read in People magazine, you know, this movie stars gay.
Not unless the person is out of the closet.
Not unless they come right out and say, hi, this is who I am.
That's right, and that was true, by the way, in the 20s, all the way to the present. It was true of gossip columns. Right. It was true of the National Enquirer. It's true of People magazine.
Right.
But it's not true if you have AIDS, because that's an illness, and people are concerned. There's ambiguity, there's uncertainty, there's anxiety, and that's when rumors spread, and that's when the magazine will print it.
Hasn't the monkey business and Chappaquiddick and we have now LBJ dismissing his driver and taking the limousine himself out to a farm to see Alice Glass? Holy cow, and Kennedy?
But things have changed.
Wow! Now,
that was the 60s.
Look at Gary
They
Hart.
have changed. Gary
They've
Hart,
changed.
that's
Gary
my point.
And
Here's my question. Is this good for us?
Yes.
You think so?
Yes.
Sure, it's good.
I think Gary Hart
I disagree with you.
Yes, I'm sorry. Why? What?
Why are they isolating the patients that have HIV, being isolated in the hospital, and tell the nurses do not get, you know, stuck with a needle or anything like that? We wear gloves and gown. Why? If you're telling me you're not contagious,
That is one of the reasons there is a lot of fear. A lot of that is unnecessary.
You know, within 5
Very
to 10
much.
years, you will get A and die. You know that.
It may well happen.
Yes.
Thank
would
you for your
happen.
sentencing, though. That is
Well,
really nice of you.
I'm just
That
saying
is
to
what
you, I went
doctors
to a
did
seminar
with a lot
and
of the
they...
people with AIDS, and they went away and died in 18
We went
months.
to, I
Now
went
they're
to a
living much
seminar. We were
longer.
told the best thing is to stay away, not to get, of course, body fluids or blood, but
So you
also
would,
do not...
you're a nurse, are you?
Yes, I am a nurse.
Would you treat an AIDS patient?
Yes, we do treat it, but we have to wear gloves, masks, and be very careful with any secretion, and do not stick yourself with a puncture or
But
anything.
you sound angry. Why are you angry?
Because he's saying he's not contagious. I would not
I
bring
didn't
my
say that.
kid to your,
I did not
to you.
say that. I said I wasn't contagious by casual contact. I do say that. But I am contagious by sexual contact or giving you of blood. I am.
But you handle needles, you know that, and other things.
But I do not stick myself
I'll give
with
you.
needles before I
know that. I'm sorry.
Hang on.
not do that.
Hold it. The lady with the yacht club wants to get in here now. I'll get to you in just a second. We'll be back to talk about rumors. What's the truth, what's the rumor, and who shall decide? I'm making it what? Hang on a minute. What am I making?
Bad and I
I'm
resent
making
it.
what?
You're making her look bad and I resent it.
Who?
I can't remember her name.
Marcia.
But
Oh,
let me
Marcia.
tell you, the only thing that I really feel bad about with regard to her is that she did not stand up and fight them.
The person accused of
did.
homosexuality in the Air Force.
stand up
Talking
and
about.
fight.
Yes. Oh,
Meanest thing that has ever happened, and I resent the military treating her that way.
and I do too. And we'll be back in just a moment.
We thought we'd better warn you about New Briar's all-natural jams, jellies, and preserves. The taste is intense. Ooh, so naturally intense, you don't just taste it, you feel it. Whoa. So please, be careful.
Taste this.
New Briar's all-natural jams, jellies, and preserves. The taste is intense.
What's your favorite hood for the holidays?
Well, I love whipped cream for my holiday desserts.
What else do you like?
Well, a slice of Hood Christmas tree ice cream.
That's all?
Oh, no! There's that delicious Hood sour cream. Okay, now what's your favorite Hood for the holidays?
Eggnog.
Hey!
Have a happy hood holiday, everybody.
And try new Hood Light Eggnog with 1/3 fewer calories.
Picture yourself in one of these gorgeous furs. You don't have to spend a fortune for a luxury fur to keep cozy warm this winter. At Mexico Furs in Waterford, you can purchase a quality fur with enormous savings. That's because we manufacture all of our fur garments right on the premises. And that means direct to you at a savings of 40 to 50% off regular retail.
All my girls wear fur from Mexico, and yours should too.
Mexico Furs, your full-service furrier. 256 Boston Post Road, Waterford, Connecticut.
A man who says Christ is back. What is Christ doing in London?
Well, he's living as an ordinary man, surrounded by an ever-growing group of people who recognize him for what he is.
Before the coming of Christ, there will be many men professing to be Christ.
I think
it's the biggest hoax I've ever heard.
On the day of declaration, when he declares himself to the whole world, you will see his face on television.
Monday morning at 10 on WTNH Channel 8.
Yes. Hi. How are you? How do you feel about this? We got him today.
Well, about the AIDS doctor. I have children, and I have to admit I wouldn't take them to a doctor that had AIDS. I wouldn't go to a dentist with shaky hands. You would do the best you can for yourself. We pay a lot of money for medicine, and we have the right to discriminate who we get to take care of us.
Would you hold an AIDS baby?
Yes.
Would you kiss an AIDS baby?
Yes.
Would you diaper an AIDS baby?
I don't know. I don't even know the answers to the first two questions, honestly.
Oh, so you're not sure, you're saying?
Right. It's sort of like, what would I do if this building caught on fire?
Why does that make her a bad person?
What?
Why does that make her a bad person? Because you're asking her these questions, insinuating that there's something wrong with her, that she doesn't want to take her child to a doctor or diaper an AIDS baby.
It doesn't
well,
make her
yes,
a
there's
bad
an
person.
inflection in your voice, I think.
It's not a bad person. Her actions are bad.
She's afraid. There's fear of the unknown. She didn't know that, say, this pediatrician might come down with AIDS.
What? It's what? Sure, you're great without a mic. Now get up here and help us out here. Stand first so we can see if you do.
I said it's a matter of why take the risk if you don't have to, with no offense intended.
It is not a risk you're taking. That's the thing, and that's where people are misinformed.
But
that is not a risk. This nurse that commented earlier is dead wrong.
Right.
There's many doctors that are fearful.
I question.
There are many doctors that are fearful of even handling AIDS patients because they're misinformed.
Hold on, hold on 1 second. One microphone is all I have. Over here, please.
Excuse me, I question how many doctors are there right now in just the United States that we are not sure of or that we do not know of have come in contact with people with AIDS. I had
people in this audience, Mike. How do we know when we're in a theater, when we're on the bus?
I had brain surgery done in New York. When this episode was real big, everybody was talking about AIDS. All I know is I had #1 man in the United States operating on me. I knew his abilities were the greatest of physicians. I did not question whether this man had ever become in contact with anyone who had AIDS.
Do you think what's your point? Should you have?
No.
So you don't care whether your doctor has AIDS?
In this gentleman's position, no.
All right. Okay. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I have a brand new first grandchild, and that pediatrician would instruct my daughter and myself to keep anything dangerous away from that child, such as small objects, cleaning agents. To serve his own interest, it's okay to bring the baby to him if he's an AIDS risk. If I'm keeping sharp objects, cleaning materials...
Why don't you tell us what you would do? What's your point?
I would not take my grandchild or encourage my daughter to take
I hear you. Now, can I have this for just a second? You speak for a whole bunch of people. This is not a criticism. It's about, let's see if we can let's examine the consequences of your position. Okay?
Okay.
Can your child play with another child who has AIDS?
It's not my child.
Well,
that's a decision my daughter has to make.
What would be your counsel to her? You're a good mother, and you've been known to give advice before.
My counsel to her would be to be very careful.
What does that mean, very careful? So that the relationship that your grandchild would have with another child who had it would be different somehow. Then that's all right. That's not criticism. Now let's understand this. Now, as long as this is going to be America's attitude regarding this worldwide emergency, then all the people now and in the future who will, and they tell us they're going to be a whole lot of them.
Oh, yeah.
You want to put them on an island somewhere? Who's going to hire them? Who's going to insure them?
I would like to see a cure.
Who's going to take care of their teeth? Who's going to? Of course, we all would.
That's the bottom line.
All right, but you cannot tell your daughter counsel your daughter not to allow, or somehow your grandchild should alter his behavior with another AIDS playmate without inevitably accepting a real deep prejudice that will spread. And if you have AIDS, people will walk around you like this.
Bill?
And you'll never get a job anywhere. No one will ever dance with you. No one will ever go on a trip with you. No one's ever going to want to sit next to you on an airplane. No one's going to want to dine with you. You will be a pariah. Now, aren't we smart enough to fix that? And if it, God forbid, should happen to someone you love, you're going to be, I sense you as a fighter. You're going to be out there. You're going to be out there fighting for the freedom and the civil liberties of the person you love. And you don't want their life to be altered by ignorance and fear.
Bill, as a grandmother myself...
Now, hang on a minute.
Yeah, you've kind of taken me away from my point. His advice would be safety against all the things we've been told to keep little children away from.
Hang on just a second. Would you what?
throw out all the knives in the house, throw out all the cleaning supplies, get rid of everything as a result of fear that there might come a chance that this child would get in contact with it. That's throwing out the baby with the bathwater. You do it safely. You keep them out of their way.
You want in?
I just
You want to stand, please? You what?
I just don't think you can look down about people. Anyone can look down on people who are afraid. I mean, we don't condemn people who are afraid to go out in a sailboat, even though the sailboat's supposed to be perfectly safe. I mean, there is...
Which do you think tastes even more Italian?
Francesco Rinaldi. As I got older, I got better.
Oh, yeah, Ralph? As you got older, you got better? We'll see.
Compare Francesco Rinaldi to Ragu. All you've got to lose is your shirt.
Hey, Ralph, me too. As I got older, I got better.
Ciao, Francesco Rinaldi.
Setting the stage for the Winter Olympics, Thursday at 8 on Channel 8.
Annette Miller's married 17 years. How many kids?
2, and it's
Two.
Inet.
Huh?
Inet.
Annette Miller is married 17 years, 2 children, and you had an affair with a doctor.
That's right.
You were really obsessed with this guy. No. In other words, he's your everything. You can't live without him, baby, kind of moon, spoon, June. It was wonderful, wasn't it?
It was wonderful, and it was horrible, Phil, because I was married 16 years, and I had been faithful for 16 years, and I didn't know what was happening to me, why I was falling in love with another man.
It wasn't that there was any particularly brittle stuff going on at home, is that so? I mean, you had a nice marriage with a dog spot and a Weber grill in the backyard, I guess, huh?
Kind of close. We lived in a small town in North Carolina, was restoring a 200-year-old farmhouse, had an 18-year career in journalism, had 2 small children, and yeah, it was a pretty decent life.
But you do tell us rather candidly in an article and in a book that you wrote about this that your marriage never was really the 4th of July with your husband. Is that pretty well put it? I mean, he was different than you. You were ambitious and he was kind of laid back.
But I would have said complimentary. I went around for 16 years saying I had the perfect marriage. I did terrific PR on this marriage.
How do you mean? You mean by public relations, you mean not exactly telling the truth?
To myself most essentially, forget to everyone else. I had to believe, I believe that, like most of us here do, believe that marriage is forever, despite the statistics that counter that now. And to allow myself to believe that my marriage was badly flawed would be to allow myself to believe that maybe it had to end, and I couldn't do that.
Right. Now, obviously, you're here because you feel there's a lot of women in your spot out there.
I know there's a lot of women. Since this book has been released, they've been writing and coming to me and stopping me on planes.
Sure. Had they what?
Stopping me on airplanes.
How old were you when this hit, Shazam?
39 years old.
39 years old, and this guy, what, came out of the kitchen with a drink in his hand at a cocktail party? And I mean,
we'd known each other for 6 years socially. We lived in a town of 3,000 people. And I'd known him all of that time, but I wasn't ripe for an affair. And at 39, I was.
What was the difference? Do you have any idea? Have you figured that out?
Lots of things. I delayed having children for 11 years, and I had then had 2 small children. I'm an urban person who.
Well, why is that, Jermaine?
I think that small children demand a lot of you emotionally, and don't, when they're very little, give a great deal.
So, in other words, kids will beat up your self-esteem, you think?
Oh, no, I think there are lots of things. I don't think you can talk only about children. I'd been married to a man for whom I was the nurturer for 16 years. A man who was very emotionally ungiving, and I was the giver. And then I had 2 small children, and I was nurturing 3 people. I was living in isolation in a small town in the country.
Yeah. You're a doer, too. I mean, you always were a kind of ambitious person, right? A writer?
Yes, I'm a writer. Yes, I guess I was ambitious. And yes,
I don't mean that in any derogatory.
No, ambition's a funny word because it cuts both ways. But I'm pretty energetic.
I really think that anybody who reads this has got to... he obviously told you everything you had not been hearing.
Obviously. Obviously, and I didn't know the degree to which I was so emotionally needy, but this man I fell very seriously in love with, and he was equally emotionally needy. He was also 39. He also had 2 small children. He'd also been married 16 years, probably in a marriage that was a lot more distant, a lot colder than even mine.
How long did you see him in a clandestine way? How long did that...
Only 2.5 months till we told our spouses.
in 2.5 months, you looked at each other in a motel room somewhere without luggage and said, we must tell, this is it, you and me forever for the rest of our lives.
Whew.
Is that
pretty
pretty close?
amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what happened,
Those are the facts.
Your husband really was not able to say, I love you out loud, was he?
Never did.
Which is not to say that he was a bad person. He
Not
just
to
was...
say he's a good, he was and is, my now ex-husband, a good and decent person, a wonderful father, and a very honest man.
So you both returned to your spouses after this tornadic 2.5 months of apparently just idyllic, never before...
Idyllic is very hard to say because you have to realize I was just obsessed with guilt. I was obsessed with love, and I didn't understand why I was falling in love so fast. I didn't understand at that time my emotional neediness and why this man was giving me what I didn't have. And I don't believe, Phil, that affairs are about sex. I believe affairs are about emotional neediness. Obviously, we act them out, as you say, in hotel rooms. But he was stroking my ego for the first time, feeling that I was wonderful and beautiful and worth something, and I was doing it to him.
You have a question already, do you?
What made you take the first step after 16 years? What's that first thing like that gets you out there?
You mean like in an intimate situation?
Right.
Well, it's funny because for a year before I acted on my feelings, I was heavily fantasizing about David Mueller, the man I call David Mueller in the book. And
it's not his name. We can only speculate on how the David Muellers out there are going to feel about this.
Poor David Mueller's.
Go
Not
ahead.
his name.
You fantasize what?
Had heavy sexual fantasies about this man. For me, that should have been a red flag because I'm not a woman who even had sexual fantasies. So for a year, I lived with that and didn't understand it. And then one night, I sat and composed, and I had seen him socially, he and his wife socially, twice in this week, and all I could think about was him. And all I could think about was making love to him, frankly. And I sat up one night and I wrote this note, and it said something to the effect, you and I talk about midlife ruts at parties. We talk about gold chains and midlife crises. I want to be alone with you. And maybe it's not wise, and maybe it doesn't matter if it's not wise, but the ball is now in your court. And I wrote that note thinking, now this is part of the fantasy. I will never send this note. And the next morning, I went to the local bookstore and bought a copy of Passages, Gail Sheehy's book, put it in the section about 38-year-old women looking for some sort of affirmation, looking for a fling. And that's how I defined it to myself, saying that this wasn't going to harm my marriage. I just somehow needed something else, obviously, at this time in my life when I wasn't getting whatever it was I needed. Still not criticizing my marriage. And I walked into his medical office with my note in the book of Passages and handed it to his receptionist and walked out with my legs shaking and thinking, I did it. I can't believe I did it. And sat by the phone and waited. Not very long.
First, it's not sex, but that's all you thought about for a year. You said an affair doesn't have anything to do with sex.
Oh, I don't think an affair. I think people have affairs because they're emotionally needy. I think people have affairs. Affairs are acts of aggression against a marriage. It's screaming, this is not what I'm getting in my marriage. Sex is how it is.
How long did you wait before the phone rang?
Hours.
You mean he called you that day?
Well, I'm trying to think. It was, yeah, that afternoon. And he said, this is the most life-affirming thing that's happened to me in a long time.
Okay, so now for 2.5 months goes on this relationship. This is absolutely a mutually exploding, beautiful thing. And I assume you got your guilt, and he does too, but you say, we're going to be adult about this. You're not going to be another woman. He didn't want you to be. So you're going to be honest. You bite the bullet, and you both return to your homes to announce, each of you, to your respective spouses that you are getting divorced.
No, that's not. Just that we were having an affair, that I was having an affair. I didn't at that point say I was getting divorced. I wasn't even willing to acknowledge that myself.
Yes.
We had spent our first weekend away. This is, you can only imagine in a town of 3,000 how far one has to travel to be alone. This is also the obstetrician in town who's delivered half the baby. So we're talking a very public man in a very small town. So the logistics were something.
I apologize for having to expedite this chronology because it's obviously very important to you and it's very well detailed in your book. But let's, you know, we've got to get to the issues here. His wife responded how?
Anger at me.
Well, and you weren't surprised.
But no anger at him. Isn't that interesting?
I don't find that hard to understand.
Well, it's very interesting. My husband was angry at me, and his wife was angry at me, and I was angry at me. So it seemed that
you're the real Scarlet.
Absolutely, and in fact, in Burning Bridges, the theme is that I'm hardest on myself.
But so were all of the three other parties were hardest.
Sure.
You're the vamp, huh?
I was the vamp, which was a very hard thing, Phil, for me to see. I have a great deal invested in respectability and had a hard time seeing that.
Okay, we'll fill in these blanks later, but now, after the information, incidentally, did she encounter you? Did you encounter this other woman at all? You knew her, obviously.
Sure, but we didn't during this time.
After this, you never sat down and...
No.
All right, so you announced to your husband that you're going to leave him and marry the doctor, and he...
None of that was that easy. We came back from this first weekend apart and realized that Wednesday afternoons were no longer enough, that we were in love with each other, and that we wanted to be together. And in fact, he very strongly pushed that we tell our spouses. I had a lot of compunctions. I was very fearful, and I was not prepared to end my marriage. But I did acquiesce and walked up the driveway carrying my suitcase to this 200-year-old farmhouse I was restoring. And my husband answered the door with a great big smile. I'd been away purportedly to visit a friend in Washington, a girlfriend, and came back and he had a big smile, and I was white, blanched, and later he told me he thought one of my parents had died because I looked. And I said, I've got something awful to say. And we walked into the library, big logs, 200-year-old house, fire in the fireplace. And I said, I'm in love with another man. I've been having an affair for the last 2.5 months. And he and Paul took my arm and said, we can get through this.
Your husband?
Yes. And I felt pretty horrible. And I said, we can't. I'm in love with another man. Thank you, Mark.
Listen, we'll be here for 3 days if we keep at this pace, all right? We've got other stories we want to tell.
Absolutely.
Now, if this isn't just too crude a summation of what happened here, please permit me to say, he comes back to her, the doctor, and says, I can't do it. Can't leave my wife.
It's
they
really...
move in together, and then he goes, all right. He moves in together, they go. Then he says, I can't do it after they move in together. And then I think, then he went back to his wife, and then he came back again. And it was, will he, won't he, are you mine or not? I don't know what I do, agony. Just a second. She checks in to a psychiatric hospital. Good girl. Almost unable to speak. The bottom of the well. How long were you there?
A month.
And you tell us you were there trying to get yourself to find who you were. Is that it? Or
well, the affair lasted 7 months. We lived together in this small town 4 of those months. And then he was gone and returned to his wife. And though my husband was willing to take me back, I only then acknowledged that it felt like the biggest trap in the world and I couldn't go back. But I was, Phil, existentially terrified of being alone, of being 40 years old now and raising 2 very small children.
You found what you didn't have in your marriage. It was wonderful, and then you lost that. So you lost 2 things. So who's going to love you anyway after all this? And I assume you felt guilt.
Oh, did I feel guilt? I defined guilt, Phil.
Your husband and you have divorced your husband.
Yeah.
Is he back with his wife?
He is still back with his wife in this small town.
I'm going to read the letter you wrote from the hospital. I wrote my last communication to David, the name you used to describe your lover, the doctor. This is your letter.
Apparently, after 7 months and 1 month in a psychiatric hospital.
Dear David, for you, for me, for any future possible us, the conditions aren't so very changed, but my absolute commitment to them has been reinforced. I cannot love you at the expense of my self-worth. I can love you only when loving you and being loved by you enhance my good feelings about me. I would wish the same for you.
What does that mean? It means we can have no relationship while you're still in your home, no relationship at all, no phone calls or letters unless you have filed for divorce and have at least a temporary separation. Again, there are no easy days ahead, but I can be responsible only for my own. I can no longer put your interest and feelings or Paul's before my own. This is a letter, dear David, that requires and desires no response from you.
Whew, did I write that? She was a strong woman.
You glad she did that?
Thank you.
Here's Mark Finkston. Now, what in the world are you doing here? You're going to have to follow this now, Mark. And what is not so funny is that you were the victim of an extramarital affair. Your wife had one.
That's right.
Uh-huh. And you're now divorced.
That's correct.
You didn't want to get divorced.
No. What had happened was that she had an affair with a guy at work. He worked 50 feet from her. 50 feet. I never knew it. I walked by the man once, twice a week. And what happened was there was these little red flags that would come around. She would say things like, what do you think of an open marriage? I love you like a sister loves a brother. I worked up at a junior college on Tuesday nights, and I tried calling home one night. 2 hours, the line was busy. I didn't know. I came home, everything was fine. Some information comes to me, really startling. So I call her up at work, and I say, who is this guy? She goes, I don't know what you're talking about. That was his first name. Then I used both parts, his first and last name, his address, the town he lived in, the state, which was the same as ours, his physical features, height, weight.
She still denies it.
Denies it. This is typical what women do. It's not a moral issue. It's not a question of right or wrong. It's just the way people react.
You mean total lie?
Denial.
Denial.
Denial. It's not so much mendacity as it is denial. So finally, I think she realizes, after I repeat this man's name a dozen times, she says, I don't want to talk about it. I said, well, I'm coming right up. She says, well, I'm not going to come up if you're going to start anything. I said, I'm not. So I went up there and I got her, and in the car, she was more angrier than I was. I had come from a life to where I didn't know what happiness was. I was beat by my father with bats, okay? I went from one foster home to another. I ended up in an orphanage. That was the greatest place I've ever been in my life. It's the only place nobody beats you. Never had a home, okay? Here, this lovely little thing, this was the sweetest thing I've ever seen in my life. I wouldn't climb a mountain for her or swim an ocean. I'd do it. I'd do it in record time. The guy that she had the affair with never asked her to leave home. Never. And in 90% of the time, they never ask. She had to have been going through a midlife or an identity. That's what my doctor says anyway. And I agree with him on some points. I got her home. She denies it. Finally, I call him on the phone. And through a few choice words, all 4 letters, I asked him what was his intentions. And he says, I have no intention of marrying her or anybody else. She hears this on the extension. She still denies it. Still. We go to bed that night. Next morning we wake up. She says, well, I see you're not going to get over this. What, 20 hours? I'm going to get over it in 20 hours. Oh, okay, fine. And it was 2 immature people. That's what it was. When you get married, you think you're the most mature thing in the world. You think you know everything.
You have children?
I have 3.
And you were married for?
I was married for 12 years.
How long have you been divorced?
Almost 3 years.
Are you on hook now? Do you think you're... does she have custody, incidentally?
I have temporary custody. I can go over and get my children anytime I want.
But they're living with her?
She puts up a fight, but they come with me.
Is there a woman in your life now?
No.
Are you still... how are you with this? I mean,
I'd still climb that mountain and still swim that sea. I wouldn't want her to know that, although I think that's...
Has she, and what's her marital status? She's staying single?
She's really back and forth.
She sees this guy still?
Right, but...
He hasn't left his wife?
He's not married.
Oh, he's not married?
No. He's done this before. She, about 2 weeks ago, me and Buck were in a car, and she said that, she says, in one of the rare times this woman had her brains back, she sat there and she said, I'm in a relationship I can't get out of, which implies to me that she wants out, because she said, I'm in a relationship I can't get out of.
But this audience, I would guess, there's a number of people in this audience that are speculating that you're still hooked on her.
Can you learn to love somebody again? Sure.
No, that's not the question. Can you learn not to love somebody?
No. You can't trust in it. You'll never trust her again. You'll never trust her
So
again.
even if she were to call you and be aggressive in attempting a reconciliation, you would always live with this sword over your head, so to speak, would you?
Bill, if you hated me, that's no reason for me to hate you. Call me anything you want to call me.
Right.
It's not going to give me that.
Nobody's suggesting that you hate anybody. That's hardly good psychiatric advice, especially. True. It'd be about as, it'd be worth what you paid for it, which is nothing. No, the question is, you know, if there's a piece of unhappiness in you because of this history, then you owe it to yourself to get rid of it.
I never had a home. I never had parents. I never had any of that. And with her, I had everything. So that's where I grew up.
So
when
you
I said.
So this is not something.
More, Mark.
What?
I doubt it.
I think Mark could have more than he had. Not knowing anything about the relationship other than how it ended, I believe he's not asking enough for himself.
We have another woman with whom we will speak here in a moment, and you'll forgive me, Andrea. We are going to break. Here's a woman who had an extramarital affair herself after 25 years of marriage with the husband of one of her best friends. Guess what happened? She filed for divorce, and what did he do? He went back to his wife? You're right. Now, how did you know that? Is this what men do? Show me a guy who's fooling around, and I'll show you a guy that you can never trust. Right. All males who fool around are louses.
Ooh.
Well, I mean, what is your position here? We'll give this audience in Stamford, Connecticut, an opportunity to comment in just a moment.
No, take the last one. I can make another batch.
Kellogg's Rice Krispies Treats. You can whip up a chewy no-bake batch in minutes. However, nobody has to know that but you.
I know how you love them, so I don't mind the work.
Besides, Rice Krispies Treats certainly taste like somebody slaved over them.
Really? It's no bother.
Rice Krispies Treats, so good, it's hard to believe how easy they are.
It's worth any amount of trouble, as long as it makes you happy.
Pie. Mom's homemade pie. Now, Cool Whip.
Oh, I want my Cool Whip.
There isn't a fresh homemade pie in the world that doesn't hunger for the fresh homemade taste of Cool Whip. Cool Whip. One fresh homemade taste deserves another.
I got my Cool Whip.
Around here, Naomi Whitmer's known for having a finicky palate. In fact, rather than settle on the tried and true recipes of her foremothers, she spent her early years in pursuit of new and different concoctions of her own. Today, Naomi works for Weaver Chicken, creating new recipes according to her own high standards of deliciousness. Like this new Weaver Crispy Fried Chicken.
Hello. I thought I'd make you something special today.
Naomi, you already did.
Who else but Halleck's offers you the best prices in full service? At Halleck's, you'll find top name brand TVs, washers, dryers, microwaves, and refrigerators, all at the best prices and all with free delivery. At Halleck's, you'll get expert service and repair in your home with Halleck's fully stocked service center. For the best buys on Genair ranges and all major appliances, come to Halleck's in New Haven, Brantford, Hamden, and Westville.
25 years of marriage, Andrea, and then what happens? You fall in love with your best friend, and he falls in love with you. Is that right so far?
That's correct.
How long did you see each other before somebody blew the whistle?
His wife caught us at the school, and we eventually she dragged us over to my home where my daughter was going to college, having a college party, going away party, and she drags us over to the house and exploits us in front of all my family and everybody.
So in other words, the wife of your lover grabs her husband and you by the hand and drags you into a party for your daughter who's going away to college, and in front of the whole room says, your mommy is sleeping with my husband.
That's exactly right.
So, in other words...
I mean, I thought that was so cruel and unjust, you have no idea.
Well, but... Now, why... Andrea, the people, they're laughing because it sounds like you have no appreciation of how you might have hurt her. I don't want to get in the middle of this, I'll tell you. I'm just trying to explain the response of this audience.
I know.
Okay, let me try. In the absence of this offended woman, or the woman whose husband was seeing you, you know, it's not hard to believe. I'm certainly most women perhaps wouldn't be capable of this, or males either, but she said, I'm going to fix this right now. I'm going to humiliate the SOB, and he's going to leave her, and do you know what I mean? It's not inconsistent.
Well, she did a good job of it. I mean, she humiliated me, you know, throughout the whole time we went together, 5 months. She knew all about it. Everybody knew about it, my children, the family.
Right. Did she have an encounter with you in a parking lot of a restaurant?
Yes, she did.
What did she do?
She kindly just beat me up.
She physically beat you up?
Physically beat me up. But you got to remember, she was a large woman. But I mean, I don't regret the affair.
Right. Andrea, you tell us, huh? You don't regret the affair. What's the matter with that? You want her to? When did this affair end, Andrea?
Oh, about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. You tell us, what was your marriage like?
It was not too good. For 25 years, for 18 years, he never touched me. Sexually, any kind. I mean, the relationship was just, I stayed in the marriage strictly for my children until they got of age.
You were like sleepwalking through the marriage.
Yes, it was like brother and sister relationship.
You were civil. I assume you said past the salt, huh?
Yes.
So you were able to talk to each other?
Oh, yes.
But there was no endearing behavior?
No, there was no endearing. There was nothing.
No hand-holding, no presents?
There was nothing.
Did he remember your birthday?
Our 25th anniversary was a sham.
How do you mean?
We went out to dinner and we didn't say 2 words to each other. For 25 years of marriage.
Yeah. What's the matter? What's the matter?
Why did you stay with him for so long then? That wasn't fair to the kid.
Because
well, I was just a devoted mother to my children. To me, they were very important. I thought once they got on their own, then they would be able to go on with their life.
But didn't you want a devoted husband, too? Didn't you have your needs?
My devoted husband had an affair for 3 years when they were about 4 and 5 years old. For 3 years.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of relationships like that, Andrea. You know that? Honestly, I do. I think there are people out there that are just...
Well, the love that I had with this man for 5 months, it's unbelievable.
You forgot that life could be like that, you mean?
Yes, I forgot that life could be that way.
So after 18 years of twin beds, all of a sudden here was someone who was really cared about
affectionate, I mean, unbelievable.
Uh-huh. And even though his wife was...
And if I had to do it again, I would do it again. And now I have filed for divorce. My husband is upset, you know, oh, come back to me. There's no going back. Maybe this was just the point where it was my going on with my life.
Yeah.
It was an
And I am 48 years old, and it's going to be rough, but I'm going to do it.
Inette, you wanted to say?
The affair for her was an instrument through which she obviously freed herself from the marriage.
Yes.
And you say, I mean, it's so easy to say, why don't you acknowledge it's a bad marriage and get out of it in a good, decent, respectable, nice way, walk away and do your children some good too. But people are afraid of being outside of relationships. We get locked into relationships very young, and this is still a very coupled society, and it's very scary to think of being on your own.
Over here, please.
I just want to know how it all got started, how this love lost of 18 years, what started that? How did it start?
The affair couldn't help.
I mean, it's
No, with her husband, how did that start?
Yeah, I bet you probably...
he's older than I am, for one thing. I mean, I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but he just never was an affectionate, lovable person.
And you married him because?
I think I was a mother to him.
Ah.
I think because he married me right after his mother had died. And I think that I was more or less just a mother for him. He wanted two children, and that was it. And
yeah. If anybody thinks by having an affair is the way out of a marriage, the right way, think of this. If a relationship is based solely on sex, when that sex gets old, the relationship gets old. But be aware of what you're giving up.
But the relationship
Be aware of that.
The relationship, I don't think, was solely based on sex. I think he needed something from me as well as I needed something from him.
Annette, you wanted to say?
Absolutely, Mark.
It's not only, it's an emotional thing. It's something that two people, just chemistry that goes together, and it just fits in, and that's where you are.
Yeah, but the pain for that
is
chemistry.
unbelievable.
If you are getting what you need in your marriage, you are not out there looking for an affair. I traveled for 18 years in my work with other men, journalists. It never crossed my mind to have an affair. After 16 years in this marriage, I was needy. And when I was needy, there was this man who was going to fulfill my needs.
You're exactly right, Lynette.
And it wasn't sex, and it wasn't what you were leaving behind you. I was reacting to a bad marriage.
But you know what you have? How many women are out there a millimeter away from this kind of thing?
Bunch.
Really? And how about? And aren't there just as many men?
Oh yes.
Oh, who do you think the women are having the affair with?
Well, that's what I was wondering.
But one thing...
Go ahead. Over here, please, Andrew.
I was just thinking that, you know, when you try to talk to your husband or your wife and say, you know, these are the problems that we have in the marriage, and he doesn't listen to you and you keep repeating it, sometimes you look for that, what's missing in another relationship. So whether it's the husband or the wife, you know, or the children involved, you have to fulfill that need. And it is a scary thing to go into, you know, to go and start living by yourself again and start all over again. So a lot of people would rather have the affair than end the marriage. They know they have that marriage, they have that security, but then they have the relationship that's fulfilling their needs.
Exactly.
Yeah, but this sounds very close to using a one-nighter as a...
But the only thing I don't like, Bill, is that why is it that the men come out smelling like a rose, and the women, when they do this, they are looked down on?
No way.
Well, but
oh yes,
yeah,
how they
Mark,
oh,
Mark
yes.
wants you to know that he's not exactly in the Disney world of his life, you know, right now.
I mean, that's the gospel
She
truth.
had an affair. My wife did, okay? For 3 years, that woman didn't hurt me enough, right? For 3 years, almost every day, all I hear is how bad I am.
Well, but
how
aren't
no
you
good
glad you're out of that, Mark? I mean, aren't you glad you're out of that?
I think what I want to do is rationalize that she's got a problem. See, I know what she was like 15 years ago. I know who she was. My doctor, he just shows you what's out in front of you. He says, remember the way she was 15 years ago. Now look at her now. Is this the same woman? No, it's 180 degrees out of phase.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
Why is this man being so unfair to his wife? Enjoying his cold relief while she suffers, feeling no desire to sneeze while she stifles hers, without all the coughs and the runny nose that torture her night, resting in the same bed where she tosses and turns. Why? Because while she took a cold tablet, he took NyQuil. The nighttime sniffling, sneezing, coughing, aching, stuffy head fever so you can rest medicine. Now a new cherry flavor, too.
The Cost Busters are here at Colonial Toyota at 470 Post Road, right here in Milford. The Fall Savings Place. How about it? A 1985 Olds Delta Royale. Every optional piece of equipment you can think of. And don't forget, $49 delivers it today. How about this deal? Here's a 1985 Chevy IROC Z, and it is really loaded. Air conditioning, T-tops, and a lot more. $49 delivers it today at Colonial Toyota.
At Bradley's, you know us for a lot. Our jewelry and our watches. You know us for small appliances and our luggage. And now, you'll know us for our incredibly low prices on AT&T phones. Right now at Bradley's, this Trimline 210 is just $39.99. And this AT&T Cordless 4410 is just $87.99. So now you know us for all these. And all these AT&T phones on sale now at Bradley's.
We have letters that say, by giving a platform to these youth hate groups, the show provided them the opportunity to spout their racist poison. This show about the women wrestlers down in Georgia, I considered an insult to my intelligence. It made me almost feel like vomiting.
You don't like me, you disapprove of our subjects, and you vowed never to watch the show again. We're answering your letters on our next show.
Tuesday morning at 10 on WTNH Channel 8.
Just a second.
Mark,
Wait a minute. Just yes, sir.
Mark, there are two sides to every problem.
Yeah.
Did your wife in any way express dissatisfaction with you over the term of your marriage that might give you some indication that such a thing might occur?
I'll give you a one-liner. Nothing was wrong. What do you think was wrong? What do you think was wrong?
There had to have been something wrong
No.
for her to
we
go
were
out and
Barbie
have an affair.
and Ken, honey, in the flesh.
There had to be something lacking in your relationship.
Show me somebody who's fooling around, and I'll show you somebody from a bad marriage.
Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
Are you under the implication that she initiated the affair?
Hang on a minute, Mark.
Mark, you said that your wife changed like 180 degrees
Yes.
over the 12 years' time.
Right.
Maybe you didn't change along with her. Everybody changes. Everybody
No, it wasn't
grows.
like that.
It has to be. Everybody
No.
changes. No one stays the same in 15.
No, but she's saying she changed for the in a more negative way is his allegation.
I don't
In her
want to get
absence, would you-
redundant.
Well, don't get redundant.
Fine, I won't.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Inette, how come there seems to be a consistent pattern here of the men being so spineless that they can't stay in the affair that they're having? It's the women who are always willing to keep it going, and the men are backing
You
out.
mean in terms of the affair?
A lot of it is money.
The women want to hang on to this guy, and he goes back to
A lot of it is money.
I mean, let me just give
in my case, had to do with money.
money, did it?
Yes.
Okay.
She
Well, I don't
she
believe
would have
it
taken him for every dime he had.
I think those are excuses, and I think that Andrea is still very fresh. And speaking of those excuses, I would have at that point said it was his children, that he felt the call of his children and was sure he was going to lose them. I say now that you're closer to it, that some of us make decisions that we've got to grow to live, and some of us make decisions to stay with the status quo and live with that.
He made the decision to stay with the status quo.
And I would prefer to be me right now, frankly.
But we still don't know quite why it is that the males are so likely. If we're done, this is hardly a...
I don't think so.
What do the numbers say on this? Most...
Very few.
Huh?
Very
Most
few.
men
Yes.
do not leave their
Not leave their
wives
wives.
and marry the other woman.
Well,
That's
or
true.
women and men. I mean, it's. I know many women.
Financially,
it's the
Sam.
reason.
Plus,
Listen to this wisdom
Financially.
back here. What do you mean financial? In other words, you can't afford to have a mistress out there. You want to take that?
No, you can't afford to support the two homes that you're about to create.
Really?
Was divorced, remarried, but there was always the question of how am I, we're just making ends meet now with one home, one mortgage payment, raising a child. How are we going to do it if I have to establish an apartment and it's very difficult. So women on the other hand, stay in their marriage, they become financially seduced. In other words, they've got a nice home, everything is okay, and they can have their affair on the side and it works.
Except it doesn't.
Except it doesn't work that way.
Inette, would you marry this doctor now if he wanted you, or was it a case where he didn't want you and now you are alone?
Well, I have to tell you that for a year I hung after this. I mean, I would love to say I came out of the psychiatric hospital cured, and it was certainly a turning point because I encountered lots of women in the same situation I was there. But for the year after having sent this letter that Phil wrote, I hung on in my own head to the idea that Phil read.
Incidentally, there's another letter. Well, go ahead. You wanted that. Let me sell this. Hang on a minute. Burning Bridges is the title, a diary of a midlife affair. This is Inette Miller's account of what happened to her.
This is the actual diary that I kept while this was going on as a way of maintaining my sanity.
Great diary.
Yes.
Thank you, Mark.
I was
Mark's
just going to
reading.
say, I was in a marriage for 21 years, and I was not in love with my husband, but we had 3 children, and because of the 3 children, it's, you know, to use the children as an excuse to stay in a marriage, I did it. I love my children. Their father's a good man, but I couldn't, felt trapped, and I had to get out of the marriage in order to feel like a complete human being.
But do you have to, how many people have to have somebody to go to get out of the marriage they're in?
Most.
I'm not...
Most.
Very
Huh?
But it
Wait a
always
minute.
starts
Hold
with
on, we
getting
got
somebody
wisdom
to
here.
talk to.
What?
No, if you can't find yourself and be happy with yourself and live with yourself, why are you rushing into another relationship?
Phil?
I don't think you know what he meant.
I'd love to answer that.
Inez, I'd like to ask you something. The way I see it, you took on this affair and your family suffered, your children, your husband, David suffered, his children, his wife, and you ended in a psychiatric hospital. Was it all worth it?
Most affirmatively, yes. And the reason is that, and it relates to what this woman was asking right here, that I didn't have enough self-esteem to believe that I could live outside of a relationship. And for the last year and a half, I've been self-supporting, taking care of 2 children, being a better mother than I've ever been, liking myself more. It is worth it for me to have gone through this.
But that's a heck of a way to get self-worth.
It's a heck of a way.
I mean, there must be
would.
other ways to get self-worth and feel good about oneself without having to destroy so many things.
I couldn't agree with you more. Would that I had had the insight. Would that I had been open enough to the idea of saying, when I started having this fantasy, saying something's wrong, let's get this marriage on track. Or
I want to read your letter to your husband, your ex-husband, on your 16th wedding anniversary. How long had you been separated from him then?
1 month I had moved out.
And the divorce had been finalized, had
No,
it?
no, no, it was a year till the divorce. The divorce is not even in this book. This book covers
I
1
see.
year.
So you've moved out.
Yes.
You out for a month, you're on your own. This is after...
I'm not on my own, I'm living with David.
Oh, this is before the hospital too?
This is 5 months before the hospital.
Oh, well, this isn't such a hot thing then. I shouldn't read this. I mean, you're not even healthy yet.
Working on it by bits and pieces.
So you're living with David. You've been out of your husband's life or a domicile for a month.
And the push and pull was
And
enormous at the time.
right. It's your 16th anniversary.
Oh, yes.
And you write him a note.
We wrote a lot to each other. We're both
This is
pretty
your
literate.
note to your husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, which you wrote while you were living with David. All right. I can't help but be optimistic for each of us. There's been so much love we've given and taken, each in our own way over the years, but we have extracted a price, each of us from the other, a price that ultimately is too high in human spirit to pay. It is that we have loved one another despite ourselves. Did I love you in spite of the person you are, or you me? I think so. How peculiar to be loved but not liked. To be loved only at the expense of renunciation of the self we each knew we were. So I'm optimistic for each of us. We are, you and I, lovable for the selves we are. We don't have to believe about ourselves that we're weak or inadequate or incompetent or stupid to be loved. Of this I am certain. So realize I'm writing this letter for me, because for some reason in this process of separating ourselves from one another on this day, January 27th, I feel a need to express some thoughts to you. And yes, in the midst of my happiest and fullest days, a certain sadness, too. He writes back. I suppose we did love each other despite ourselves. I knew from the beginning that loving you meant that I would be overwhelmed. Maybe that's why I always had such trouble saying it out loud to you. And there I was, shortly after you broke the news, saying for the first time, straight to your face, with no reservation, I love you, precisely as you slipped out of my arms. When I see you, you look so fine. When I hear you, I feel that uncomfortable fear. It's very difficult for me to be near you. My eyes tell me one thing, my mind another, and my heart a third. And we'll be back in just a moment.
I'm leaving. I'm going.
Guess there's no point baking Pillsbury's best cookies.
Oh, cookies?
Hot and fresh dough.
You'll never see me again.
So creamy smooth.
I mean it.
Your cookie dough. Oh, you're so chocolatey. Oh,
I miss my plane.
hot and fresh dough.
And now look for my new chocolate chip cookies.
Now I know why supper isn't ready. So you call this supper?
You think living with you is some picnic? You're not so great.
At least I work.
So do I. I have a million things to do around here.
Like what? Nothing's done. All you do is exercise your elbow.
I'm not drunk. I only had 2.
You've got a problem.
Okay, Mr. Know-It-All. So what am I supposed to do about it?
You wouldn't see the answer if it were staring you in the face.
Day or evening alcohol treatment programs. For help, call Gunster Rehabilitation Center.
What's in the bag? Chocolate chip cookies. Did you smell like mine? Nope. Are they warm? Kind of cold. Is it all melty inside? Are you kidding?
Introducing Nestle Toll House ready-to-bake frozen cookie dough. You're only 10 minutes away from rich, warm, melty, home-baked cookies.
Treasure, are you kidding?
New Nestle Toll House ready-to-bake cookies. Warm, rich, fast.
It's a minor miracle.
Why do I wait until the last minute to buy gifts, especially for my wife?
Isotoner gloves. What a great gift. He's so thoughtful. He always plans ahead.
Isotoner gloves. You've got a great gift on your hands. And this week only, this tote bag is yours free when you buy Isotoner gloves. So this season, give the one-size gift that fits practically everyone on your holiday list and get a free tote bag.
The Near East story began about 30 years ago at Hannah Kalajian's diner. Now, the taste of her traditional rice pilaf recipe is catching on all over America. Which is why we've made our first TV commercial. Because people always ask, where did something like this come from?
Yes, ma'am.
It seems that in all the affairs, men do not seem to realize what's going on.
How do you mean?
Well, Mark said that there was nothing wrong with his marriage. I wonder if the two other ladies had the same their husbands had the same problems.
When I didn't say there was nothing wrong. I didn't mean that there was nothing wrong with my marriage. I'm sure there was something I did, but it's not what. I'm sorry if I'm assuming what you think.
You don't have to apologize. Let's understand this woman's point. You think the man...
spouses in this whole situation do not seem to know what was going on.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah, sort of like being married, you know, like they tell a story about a woman who didn't know she was married to a drunk until one night he came home sober. She... Andrea, you didn't know how bad you had it. Is that so?
That's right.
And I think you could almost say the same thing. You were cruising through life, so to speak.
Absolutely.
At a 5 level on the meter.
5 level.
Huh? And kept saying that it was a 10 to myself.
And then you had it. Then you became involved in a 10, and you said, "Holy cow, this is the way it can be."
Something like that.
Did the doctor really care about you?
Well, he filed for divorce. He left his home and family in a small town where he was about to blow his medical practice out of the water.
How many affairs did he have previous to you?
None. He was completely monogamous.
You know that for a fact,
yeah,
though?
I know that as much as I know anything.
Yeah.
I want to ask the lady behind the screen, how come she was married for 18 years with no contact sexually, and how did the kid...
And let that happen.
And let that
25 years. 25 years, ma'am, we were married. And 18 years without any physical contact.
That's her point. How could you have spent 18 years with that
I don't know. You tell me how I did it. I think I did pretty good.
Yeah.
Number one, I think it's sad that we have to sit here through this. I'm engaged to be married, and this is sickening to me.
Well,
Number two,
please try not to be too sick, because we want you to be happy.
But
the whole point here is you don't deny this happens, huh?
Oh, no, but the other comment I had that they were all laughing about up here was that Inez's book sounds very well planned out. It just sounds like she went and picked him out, and the whole bit just sounds like a well-planned book that she can support herself now.
Oh, let me respond to that. Oh, that's terribly unfair. First of all, if you know anything about writing, you don't make money at writing. This is 90% of the American books lose money, number one. Number two, I kept this diary.
We believe you. Don't look defensive. Why would you be that accusatory about her?
It just sounds like, in the first place, she said she's a doer, she does this, she was literary, she kept this diary, she sent the note to him. Why could they write so beautiful letters to each other but could not speak to each other?
I think that's the whole point, isn't it? Isn't that the irony
I
of...
wish you a very happy marriage. I'm a firm believer in marriage, and I hung in there for 16 years, and I wish you more than that.
I want to know...
Yes, you want to know what?
I want to know, why is it that in the relationships, everybody seems to want, you want to have a 10, you want to have a... Why?
I mean, used that metaphor. I mean, that was my...
Okay,
what is it that we should have, don't you?
Wait, sometimes I have a 5, sometimes I have a 6, sometimes I have a 4, sometimes
and
it's a 10.
And your point is what?
That you can't always have a 10.
But is it your feeling that they don't know that?
I think so. I think they're all looking for some euphoria, some utopia, some kind of thing that doesn't exist.
Not out there.
Marriage is hard work. I mean, I've been married 22 years.
Yeah. But it's what's important.
And I plan to marry another 22.
It absolutely is, and I believe as strongly as you, if I could not have come through these years of excruciating pain, as recorded in this diary, without having a sense and a belief that nothing is perfect and that what lies ahead for me is probably more difficult than what lies behind in terms of any future relationship with two small children.
Right. When did you last see your ex-spouse?
Last weekend, Sunday. He has children every weekend. We see each other twice a week.
And so you're civil and you can sit down and have
More
coffee?
than that, we go to PTAs. We're good parents. We care a lot about our kids, and we do talk a lot.
Mm-hmm. And if the doctor came back in your life, you would?
No, I know that I deserve better than what he offered.
That last letter meant something then from the hospital?
Oh, yeah.
You knew you had to get out of this if
I
you
knew
were...
I had to get out. It's not to say that I didn't spend the last year waiting for him to come to his senses, but I'm beyond that now.
And we'll be back in just a moment.